what are the biggest challenges engineers face today, and what concrete steps can firms take to create meaningful and lasting change, especially in areas like pay, equity, and career progression.
A big question was, what is it that we can do to better retain and engage our talent in this profession? Of course, we've had challenges with pipeline, but we've also had challenges with retaining, especially in the middle position. And then, of course, in 2009 and 10, we had problems in the recession where we'd lost a lot of them.
Structural engineering is evolving, and so are the challenges that come with it. From balancing innovation, resilience, and sustainability to tackling workforce retention and industry equity, there's a lot to unpack. But in this episode, we sit down with Natalie Tse, SE, a lead AP, client relations, and business development specialist at Tipping. Natalie's journey from structural design to business development has given her a unique perspective on how engineers can bring more value to clients, communicate effectively, navigate career growth. And in this episode, we'll be talking to her about some of the biggest workforce challenges in structural engineering and the impact of diversity and equity efforts, and how firms can take real, actionable steps to attract and retain top talent. If you're an engineer looking to grow in your career or a firm leader seeking to build a thriving workplace, this episode is for you. I'm your co-host, Matt Picardal.
And I'm your co-host, Alex Dana, and this is the Structural Engineering Channel.
Hey, Natalie, thanks so much for joining us today.
I am so excited to be here. Sorry, I totally interrupted you, Matt.
No, it's all good. Yeah, it's a great start. Yeah, but can you tell I know I've known you for a couple of years already in the industry, even though we're different cities apart, but can you share your journey throughout your career and with Tipping as well, and some of the key lessons that you've learned from working on complex projects with them?
No problem. I would say that the beginning of my career, at least in school, wasn't your typical linear path. I would say when I went to university, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but way back in high school, I mean, this is probably the most common part, is that I was good at math and I loved physics. But one thing that was pretty unique was that I loved also art, and I was very good at art. And so when I was looking for something that was going to be fulfilling and for myself, a career that, brought together a lot of my skills and interests, I was looking for something that would integrate all of those. And so having that spatial awareness definitely helped my pathway into structural engineering. So I went and studied in Canada. I grew up in Canada, about an hour from Toronto, but I went to school at Queen's University. And then I moved to California about 20 years ago, following love. So after getting married, I moved here. And then, so I've been practicing in structural engineering in the Bay Area for all those 20 years, and having worked at one firm in Toronto and then 3 different firms in California. But one thing that I did want to mention is that even as a young student, I was always very fascinated by my influence of my personal influence on people around me, as well as the community. So that, I think, has definitely influenced my trajectory in my career. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit and how that's transitioned from me in a very technical role and being a project manager into my current role, which is client relations and business development specialist at Tipping. So I joined Tipping about 7 years ago. It's a 38-person firm that does structural engineering. So we're a consulting firm, but we're very service forward. And when I say that, I think that the important thing to mention is that we're always looking to ask bold questions. And then one of the things that really appealed to me about Tipping was that it has a culture of coaching that kind of tries to encourage the young engineers to think outside the numbers. And so we're always looking to elevate the craft of structural engineering so that we can unlock possibilities for our clients and the people that we serve. So I joined Tipping as a project manager, and about a year ago, I was doing a little kind of soul searching, reflecting upon my career and what brings me fulfillment and joy and how that relates to some of my special skills, I guess you could call them. And that's when they kind of helped me craft a position that was utilizing more of my skills in building relationships. And that's how I'm now in this role.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm excited to talk about it because I know you've had a really great career journey with different transitions too and different phases of your life. So looking forward to hearing about that.
One of the things I actually did want to mention, because one of the questions you had was just what are some of the lessons you've learned that you want younger engineers, emerging professionals to think about,
Yeah.
is really to look beyond the numbers. I know it's hard for students who've, spent their last 5 or 6 years deep in understanding math and the stability and basically all of the patterns that they see, and taking those numbers and looking beyond them and finding those patterns. So at every stage of every project that they're working on, what are the patterns that you can see? Looking beyond, all of your calcs. What did you learn in each of these phases, and what can you do better? Acknowledging that even if some of the challenges that you've experienced, they may have been setbacks, but also they are also opportunities for growth.
Yeah, I can see where the coaching culture comes in. It seems like even just from the way you're asking those questions, it seems like for the younger engineers, it's those are I think coaching has a lot to do with the questions, the type of questions that you ask, and even just from yourself, I can see the culture of that already.
All right, so I think it'd be my turn then. What makes structural engineers the most valuable to clients, and how can they better communicate their expertise, especially as sustainability and resilience become bigger priorities in the industry?
I think I'll start by just mentioning, most people who acknowledge what structural engineers do, there's a value that we bring just based on the foundations that we gain through school. So a lot of that is just thinking back to statics and importance of safety and stability. Those are basically our bedrock, right? So we create these foundations through our education. But once we start working, I think the part where everything kind of comes together is really looking beyond just optimization and efficiency and the risk that we're trying to balance. And where we can really work on those skills is communication to our clients. But before you start communicating the value, it's really an understanding what those values are. So I think what I really want emerging professionals to really think about is, what is it about your problem solving and innovation that brings value to clients? And before you can really answer that, you have to listen to understand what your clients' needs are. So how do they define success? For some architects and developers, they may have differences of opinion, right? So nowadays, I think the big thing, that initiative, at least, that architects who are working towards creating a better built environment is having a positive, lasting impact on the communities that they're serving. So what does that mean? And then that ties us back into sustainability, so structural resilience, and selecting appropriate structural systems for whether it's vertical or lateral systems. What is it that we can do to translate the kind of technical jargon into pieces that they can understand? So I feel like if we can identify opportunities for sustainability initiatives that bring value to them, whether it's the architect or the developer or owner, then they can really take and digest it in better ways. And then that's when they can start to see where our value is. It's really that integrated value of all of the things that we've learned into practice. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Kind of open up the black box that is the engineering firm and have them go outboard and ask questions, understand your customers, your clients, what their needs are, and try to process that into a more of a deliverable design that actually meets their intent instead of just another one you pushed across your desk. I like it.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, like this whole ability to listen, to really listen like intentionally and not listen for a response, that is a skill that takes time for us to develop. And it's probably one of the biggest tenets of business development is just that ability to listen and respond appropriately, and listening to and refining how you're going to bring the value to them.
Yeah, it's not just, provide them the gravity or lateral framing. I think
Hmm.
that's when you start off, that's what you think you're doing. But then when you get to the next level, at the end of the day, you're working with people. And especially for the clients that are probably non-engineers, they may be
Hmm.
expecting, yeah, like you were saying, maybe it's sustainability and resilience. If that's something that they really value, then that may not be, if you're just giving them gravity and lateral systems, that may not be exactly what they want. And yeah, and that's the communication aspect that I think hopefully engineers develop throughout their career once they get more senior. And going back to the sustainability and resilience, how do you see that shaping future client expectations? And what about firms that are trying to provide that service too? Like what do you see it in the future going about?
I think nowadays, in order for any firm to really continue to thrive, the sustainability aspect of it and the structural resilience has to be in their framework. Every structural firm should be committing to these and have it as one of their value propositions. But I think where there is greater opportunity for us as structural engineers is to really acknowledge that we can shape our clients' expectations. We have the ability to heighten our focus on embodied carbon commitment and focus on what are those renewable resources and those options that for them. Another example would be, adaptive reuse options. So, are there opportunities where we can reuse existing structure as opposed to demolishing and integrating new systems? Are there intelligent ways to reuse a piece of wood that is from with this part of the building and then bring it into another portion of the building? And that way you don't have to take that formerly used element and put it into waste, because we acknowledge all the contributions to embodied carbon in our designs. I think for firms and leaders and project managers and even, young engineers, I think one thing we can all commit to is transparency and accountability when it comes to these initiatives. So I think most of practicing professionals are familiar with SE 2050, and I think if if engineers are just starting to get their fingers wet into sustainability, a big part of that growth is in education and creating tools within your firm for, you know and kind of bringing them into the practice of day to day, such a life cycle analyses. How do you what kind of tools that can you use or create within your firm so that that becomes a regular practice? And then moving beyond that, it goes into advocacy of clients and showing them some opportunities. And then I think the next step beyond that, once you get to a thriving level, is having individuals within your firm play a role in policy making. If there are opportunities there, and if it's not in policy, it's just being aware of what the options are, staying educated on other alternatives to the traditional methods of integrating sustainability into your practice. So there are lots of different manufacturers that are creating new products that are using renewable resources, for example. Staying educated on what those options are and weighing the pros and cons and communicating that to your partners and some of your clients.
Yeah, and I think it's important for the structural engineers too, just because I think the education part that you were talking about, just educating yourself on some of the basics of because engineers have a part to play in sustainability and resilience. And sometimes we may forget about that, whereas I'm just going to specify steel or concrete, but there you can have a voice in where that concrete comes from or where that steel, how those materials are made. And just being aware of those, like you were saying, is just a big step forward that can help for that 2050 goal. That sometimes you just need
Exactly.
to,
Yeah.
yeah. Even though we're structural engineers, we still have a part to play in it.
Yeah, and even I feel like in in the conversation of like building relationships, finding other people who work in our industry who are, what we consider more like thought leaders, having those relationships helps fortify some of the learning. So if you can build connections through like your commitment to learning, that is a really nice way to, kind of showcase and spotlight like the technical expertise of other people within the practice.
As I started at Simpson, I started to really quite start to understand how important a large network is, and connecting with people that are similarly minded to help you achieve a kind of a group goal or a consensus on anything, and it really starts to be more beneficial, makes your job more fun as an engineer to have that kind of a network set up to where you're like, oh, because you run into a lot of issues that, ooh, maybe I don't understand this entirely, or I'm not familiar with that code, but I have a friend over here that works in that exclusively. So I'll give them a call, see what they have to say. And just expanding that pool really helps you, I guess, navigate your career as a younger engineer when you haven't specialized and you're just kind of working, designing everything all at once. Oh, so I really like the idea of that, grouping the thoughts together and finding those like-minded people to work with. And you mentioned SE 2050, but your leadership with SE3 has influenced how firms approach workplace culture, DEI, and retention. What are the biggest challenges engineers face today, and what concrete steps can firms take to create meaningful and lasting change, especially in areas like pay, equity, and career progression?
That's a great question, and it's a question that, of course, is near and dear to my heart. Uh, SE3 is actually celebrating its 10-year anniversary of its original inception, and right in the early parts of that engagement, when we were developing our or collecting our thoughts and how we wanted to frame some of the surveys that we were putting together, a big question was, what is it that we can do to better retain and engage our talent in this profession? Of course, we've had challenges with pipeline, but we've also had challenges with retaining, especially those in kind of in the middle position. And then, of course, in 2009 and 10, we had problems in the recession where we'd lost a lot of valuable engineers to other professions due to layoffs during that recession. And so we don't have as many people in kind of what would now be the leadership positions. So the senior engineer, project manager, and people in associate project director level, we've lost a lot of those people. But when we think about those who are kind of in that early career phase, I think the big part of the engagement discussion kind of ties in with what are the facets of what we called engagement. And I think about 8 to 10 years ago, I came across this book, and it was written by a gentleman named Daniel Pink, I think. And the title of the book has the word drive in it. I don't remember the full title, but it's something like what's something amazing that we've learned or unexpected that we've learned about motivation. And when it comes to motivation, especially intrinsic motivation, there are three main components that he was trying to, relay to all of us in this book. And one of them is autonomy. So autonomy is like the ability to kind of take control of your own tasks and the way in which you do them. And that includes, flexibility and basically an approach. But when engineers feel that they can be in charge rather than somebody kind of micromanaging them, they are definitely they're much more engaged in the process. And then the second part is mastery. Of course, as structural engineers, a lot of us are trying to build that foundation at early part of our career, but it takes time to develop those skills. And so if you give opportunities for early career professionals to continue to hone those skills and develop competencies for all types of materials, for all sectors, that's when they can start to feel really fulfilled in their growth. So providing those resources to them, not only, books and examples, but also tools for how to manage their how they're gaining their proficiency. And then the last part is about purpose, having a purpose to what you're doing. And of course, I think most of you will be familiar with Simon Sinek, and he also published a book similarly, and it's all about understanding the why. I think, all of these, tools help us to understand what engagement is, which, if you're a PM who's just learning how to navigate that skill of working with people, I think this is a big part of that growth. Because once you can connect with the people who are working with you, then they stay committed to you and loyal to you, and they'll value your opinion and feel like they can trust you as a manager in your growth. So that's the first part, and that's about engagement. But also, I think a big part of that is just for any engineer, no matter where they are on the career, is continuous learning. I think continuous learning is, a part of that mastery that you're creating for yourself, but asking yourself the questions about, are you getting the opportunities and exposure in the project work that you're doing to be able to take the SE? And if your PMs aren't advocating for you in the project assignments, you kind of need to advocate for yourself. So I think those are kind of some of the tools that early career professionals can gain in the early part, is just being able to advocate for yourself. And then the next part, when it comes to project managers, I think a key part, and this kind of traces back to a talk that I did about 2 years ago on how to create a truly inclusive work environment. I like to reference Google's study from, I don't remember what year this was, maybe 2010, 2015. It's called Project Aristotle. Are you guys familiar with that?
No, sounds familiar.
Okay.
I think when you
Okay.
say it,
I like to
ring a bell.
reference it because, they have tons and tons of tools. They have, of course, resources to do these studies. And so Google was very interested in how they can create these highly performing teams. And so they had gone through all these different studies to try to identify what were the key factors that influenced teams that really were doing things that are innovative, where their people were truly engaged and making a difference. And one of the keys, like the one thing that rose to the top, was this thing called psychological safety. So what we want as project managers, and this is especially important for a profession where it's changing in terms of the landscape that we're seeing in early career professionals. It's becoming more diverse. So our profession has seen a lot more diversity in those engineers who are coming in straight out of school than we've seen in the past. So in order for us to give them opportunities to really grow and flourish and create opportunities for them to be really creative and innovative, we need to create environments that give them safety in what they're saying. So that includes like the possibility of saying something that other people may not think is all that smart, right? So if you can present your ideas as a student who just came out of school, that is an environment that is safe. So that's what we want as project managers. We want to create an environment where everybody's opinions are valued.
Yeah, I know from my experience, when I was getting into project management, there was that transition where it was less about, yes, there's still calcs, but it's not just the calcs anymore. It's, oh, you're managing one, two, or three other people as well. And it's very easy to just, oh, here are my task, throw them at the engineers. But you'll quickly learn that, or I did at least, where no, it's, you can't just do that. You're working with people, and sometimes, like you were saying, with the diversity, they're at different backgrounds, and they might have gone to different schools as well, or they may be experts at something, experts at other things, maybe not so good at other things, and I think one of the most important things was, yes, making them feel safe where they feel comfortable asking questions to me, right?
Exactly.
Because
Hmm.
if they're too direct where they feel they can't ask the question back, it doesn't work that way. It's just that's why they're there. They have great ideas, and they have different ways of thinking, innovating. And I think what you were saying, where if you can make them feel safe, then not only are they going to have a better relationship with you, you'll have a better relationship with them, but that leaves room for innovation. I'm
Exactly.
seeing it come together like that.
That's great. That's really great. And I think, a lot of business leaders, we're kind of stuck for a while on this, performative DEI. But what we want leaders to see is that there is value in diversity, and they, they should look beyond the metrics and just do what they can to foster this support for early career professionals, so that they can feel like their diverse opinions, their opinions that might be non-traditional, are valued.
And I know we were talking about maybe some of the manager leadership, but what about employees, the ones that just came to the workplace and they think they can't do anything because, oh, I'm new, I don't have any leadership responsibilities. How can they take some of that, I guess, making a difference in terms of no matter what stage you are as an engineer?
I think that's a fantastic question, because I think we want to now transition into a mindset where everybody's voice is can be of influence. And that's what I want. That's what I'd like to tell when I'm mentoring other professionals. I want them to know that everything that they say may impact how leaders of their firm, managers, do things, how they think. I think, if they have an opinion about how staff can be better managed, how workload can be distributed to so that there's less burnout, for example, how you can create opportunities for a better work-life balance. What is a robust system that you can adopt into your daily practices, to help improve the systems? And I have a lot of opinions about that, but it starts with some of the tools that you have within your firm. Like Tipping has some great tools that we've been using to be able to share our project engineers with between different project teams. Like, even if you can just loan somebody for 2 weeks just to help push out, collector design, for example. And I feel like if young engineers feel stressed and burned out, they need to learn how to advocate for themselves and ask for help. And like, on that whole topic, Matt, about like trust and building trust, if you can't ask for help, I think there's a problem in your relationship that you need to work on. And I mean, you can find a coach to help you work on some of those skills, and how you can communicate, some of the struggles that you're going through. I think a lot of people have a hard time communicating when they're going through difficult times. I remember even 8 or 9 years into my career, and having grown up in a Asian family where your parents tell you that you have to be strong, and not to complain about your workload or the tasks that you're given. At the time when I was young, I always thought that was a great value to have to be stoic. But when I started kind of reflecting on it at the 8 to 10 year mark, I acknowledged that that was actually to my detriment, in the sense that if I learned to ask for help, as in like find somebody else to help take off some of the things off my task list, then we would be able to feel more confident in our design. And there's no need for me to hoard my tasks. It's of no great value to my own personal well-being, nor the outcome of our projects. So if we can come together and collaborate on even just our overall schedule, then we can work together better, and that leads to better engagement and retention. And then I think we can acknowledge that when we communicate these challenges, we improve our relationships and the trust that we have for each other.
Yeah, I can resonate with that. I know, I think both of you, since you've worked in the design industry, sometimes there could be some long hours or some long projects. And even when I'm talking to younger engineers that are, they have some of those mindsets where, oh yeah, I'm overworked, I'm this and that, I have so much on my plate. And then if you ask them, does your manager know? It's like, no, they're not going to have enough resources. Or sometimes you'll get the, I'm new, I got to go pay my dues mindset, where it's like, okay, I get it, I know,
Yeah.
I've had that phase too. But once what you were saying with engagement, and I guess even the sustainability of it all, it's great for when you need to go through those big deadlines. But if it's not something that you can sustain week in, week out, I don't think, mentally. And I think maybe that's even a factor too. Like if you don't have that trust, you'll end you'll end up burning yourself out, and then that can lead to some attrition for some of the industry. And as, as a team, right? It's from the bottom to the top. If that relationship's there and everyone's working together, hopefully that could, yeah, see what they can do about maybe resources that employee may not know about.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it's been at least, like I said, 10 SE3 has been around for 10 years, but I feel like we've definitely influenced the way that business leaders think about how they're managing their practices. And that's one of the things that I'm really proud of, that before SE3, people got away with a lot of things. I know of people who were practicing at least 10 years before I started, and I know somebody who was working 60 to 70 hour weeks way back in the day. And we don't want that. We don't want to burn out our people. We want them to feel like they can feel supported by everyone in the firm,
Mhm.
by everyone in the profession. And we lose people. I think one thing that's might be worth mentioning is how much effort and goes into training anybody in your firm. As a manager who's seen people come and go, I think people like to see a number when it comes to the value of losing somebody, like how much it costs the company. So, and I've seen numbers in the range of anywhere between like 50% of somebody's salary to 250% of their salary. Like anytime you lose somebody, you lose about that much to the company because of
Mhm.
the interruption, how long it takes to train somebody, and then even like how many resources used to even find somebody of equivalent value to replace the loss.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, and I think, as you think about along the lines of sustaining or keeping employees or coworkers on board, that trust of communication, one, when you take on too much work, you kind of lose sight of where you're going, and you just have to tunnel vision for a while, get things done. But during that whole time, you're actually kind of a loss to your company and yourself, because you're not spending the extra time that you would to identify what's the better way I can do this. Are there other resources that our team can pull in to make it more efficient, kind of on the whole? So just taking all the work yourself and just processing it through. And I do this probably even to this day, I would imagine. But you kind of you put yourself in a silo, and that's not really what we want in the industry. The more communication that we see in the industry, one, the better the projects go, and then the better served the clients are. But also, we keep people happier that are in the industry, because I think that's kind of a lot of the issues that we face is we're all pretty intelligent people, and we think what we said is very clear, but sometimes not so much, and sometimes you don't speak up for yourself or advocate for yourself that much. So we're all highly technical people, and the industry known for being super technical, leadership often needs to shift a little bit to kind of open up for the younger employees. So for you, what does it mean to lead with vision and resilience in structural engineering today?
That's a great question. From the perspective of a femme leader, I think a big part of the responsibility is in anticipating future challenges, like acknowledging what those challenges are now and how you can adapt to them. And so, I mentioned earlier a problem with retention, and that is largely associated with pay was one of the things. And secondly, stress and overwork. And so I think as a leader, looking beyond money, for example, is like tying it back to each employee and what drives them, like the motivation part of it, but thinking about how you can how you can connect them more deeply with the values of the company. So when I say that, I personally like to think about, back to the thought of like autonomy as well as growth in the mindset of what are they mastering and where are there opportunities for them. And then even at the backbone of it all is like the values of inclusivity within the firm. So giving everybody a voice, but also, showing some cultural humility as a leader, acknowledging that we all have differences, but without judgment, being committed to self-evaluation and self-critique as a leader. Like, what can you do better always? And then the other parts of it are about driving innovation. And innovation comes with a lot of, I guess, requirements. And that some of that could be, research and then staying on top of some of the advancements that are being created, but also to being open to change internally. Like, how can we create new systems within any of our building types, for example? And are there ways to develop a new lateral system, for example, so that you can distribute forces more evenly vertically? So then innovation, again, comes from thinking outside the box and asking good questions, but supported by other challenges that are expected from clients. For example, like, how can you champion sustainability while trying to drive innovation? And are there ways to integrate both of those? And then the final bit is just about collaboration. How can you foster collaboration? Because it's through that collaboration within other people who may have mastery in a specific topic within your firm to bring ideas to life.
I'm thinking also about the skills needed for that type of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
What soft skills do you often see that need to get developed in those leadership type of roles? Because I know it's not just technical, but then when you get into leadership, it's not all technical. So what do you often see? Like, what skills, soft skills that people often lack, and maybe some recommendations on how to improve them?
Yeah, I'm so glad that there's a large student audience and in the podcast. So I think this is a great opportunity to remind people to think about, what actually drives business growth, right? And for me, like, it's taken many years, like 2 decades of practice to really understand one of the tenets is just how do you build trust? How do you build trust with the people that you work with? And so a lot of that is emotional intelligence. And, I can say that as many times as I want, but, how do you build that emotional intelligence? And you can certainly go through, trainings on empathy. But I think a big part of that is just giving yourself grace and time to evaluate awareness, I think, in your day-to-day interactions. And that includes team collaboration and perhaps one of the things I want people to think about is like who is who is a leader in your life who you truly feel inspired by? Like what is leadership to you? I think we should always ask that to ourselves. Like, for you guys, what do you think are the key components of a good leader?
I can just go off of when you mentioned someone, like, who do you think is a good leader? I definitely have a couple people in mind. One person I'm thinking of,
Mm,
some of the traits are when, some, I guess, some mentorship sessions or just having a cup of coffee with them. It did always go back to the way this person treated his employees, his people. I was always surprised on barely uh, business was doing well, but he never really mentioned about the business. It was always about, oh, if my employees, it's like 5 and my employees are still at work, I tell them to go home. like,
hmm
like
Exactly.
we'll get you help tomorrow or whatnot. But the employees, they really want to do good work, so they
Yeah.
really just want to stay and finish up work, but he doesn't want them to because he wants them, to have some work-life balance and
hmm
letting them feel safe that, hey, it's okay. If you don't finish it today, I'm going to help you out or someone else is going to help you out with it. So it's kind of like, right? What the boss doesn't want them to work too much, but then the employees, since they care about the boss that much, they really want to do good work. So it's kind of like a balancing act, but that's how you get good work. Employees that want to be there, employees that want you, that want to do good work for you. So that's kind of the things that come to my mind.
That's great. Yeah, it's really great. And like you said, Nat, like I feel like when I say that it's important for people to learn how to listen, it goes beyond just listening to the words. It's like looking at body language, looking at the behaviors that you're projecting onto other people, right? An example is when somebody goes on paternity leave. Are they using the paternity leave? Are they using that time to take off and be with their family and be engaged, or are they checking their email all the time? Like people see all of these patterns, right? And so you want to show that you are committed to the company, but also that you value your personal life and that you have balance and you create time for exercising so that you can be a healthy and wide awake and energetic person the next day.
And today, I was already pretty convinced that you were a good leader before we met, but when you started talking about communication and building trust, it's something that we think about all the time in my role because I'm more in business development and engineering, but you focused in on listening and awareness, and that really kind of is what I'm looking for in a leader. I want somebody that knows what we need to do, gives us that vision, but then focuses on the second part of actually building our own resilience within our team. And if we have opinions, taking the time to
hmm
listen, process those, explain why or why not, that makes sense, and just actually, in my opinion, lead, right? To be a leader,
That's
you have
right.
to be able to follow a little bit, listen to your team, and then help them or guide them in the right direction. And it certainly feels like you fit the build. So, what final piece of advice can you share with structural engineers looking to lead with vision and resilience in their careers?
Right. I actually thought about this for the whole entire month after you invited me to come join this talk. I think first and foremost, I think building your foundations, I think is a critical part of the journey. And I know that a lot of young engineers might hate me for saying this, but if you can get your PE, get your SE, get all your licensure done. And and that I know I've listened to your podcast where you were talking vulnerably about the challenges of getting your licensure, but I think it's worthwhile in the sense of it builds the technical competency, it
Yes.
builds confidence. There are just so many, like a myriad of benefits beyond just the letters. And for me, it was so eye opening to see what I didn't know, to go through that process as painful as it was.
Yeah.
So, but when I talk about foundations, I don't just talk about the technical competencies. I also look beyond the rigor, the technical rigor, and I want people to think about how important it is to start building your foundation of people. So, what is your presence within your firm? What is your presence outside of the firm? And then when we talk about like other professionals within engineering, and then also beyond that to architecture, engineering, construction, what is your relationship with people that you work with in your projects and outside the projects? Because it's never too early to build a friendship. And when you build your friendships, I know it's very hard for a lot of us introverts, myself included. Sometimes the easiest way to build and fortify a strong friendship is by asking how you can help somebody. And I can't say that enough to people who are starting their career, how important it is to build those foundations of people who you can trust. Again, hold the trust thing, because those people will, they may not be people whose exact footsteps you'll want to follow. And that's why I'm a big advocate of having many mentors in your life who fill in the voids of different things that you want to excel or improve. But again, like, it's about having this right growth mindset about everything in your life. So whether that's the soft skills that you want to develop, or the technical competencies, or becoming a leader one day of a firm, or how you can become just a better person or a better manager or a better friend, all of those things come together for you to be a better engineer and a better person. And it kind of ties back into, me as a high school student thinking about, hey, what can I do to think and act better for myself and for other people around me? Because everybody has the power of influence. And I think to really fortify like this whole everything that we've said today, it's recognizing your impact, where your potential for impact and influence. And it takes a lot of soul searching, I think, sometimes, but I think it should be something that we do day to day, and acknowledge that influence will change over the course of your career and your life, but you have the power to influence your influences.
I would entirely agree. And I also think if you're not consciously thinking about how you're influencing people, then you're unconsciously influencing them. And that's probably not the best leadership practice. Yeah.
Exactly. And that will bring you so much fulfillment in life. People always ask me, hey, Nat, why are you such a positive person? I'm like, because I'm always thinking about things that are helping others. And I think like a lot of the decisions that I've made to date are a function of my true values and staying close to them and being aware of them. So
that's great. That's your secret. How do you always ask yourself, how can I help other people? And then that in and of itself, that brings you joy, and it's going to help others, and then others are happy. Kind of the circle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
thanks
that's
so much,
probably,
Natalie.
like the podcast itself is like, it's really filling in a lot of gaps for people, I think, who need some support and coaching. It's kind of like this nice little avenue for getting free coaching.
Yeah, we definitely get
So
emails about, how it's helped people out, how it's helped engineers out. And I think a lot of it has to do also with, there's more access there. I know when I was a student, it was very like, I was shy. I wasn't going to go talk to an engineering professional and ask them. It was like I had to figure it out from like my buddy that just started work. He's like, hey, how's it like? And so, but just making it, making design professionals accessible to anyone that wants to hear it, I think that's been really great, just because it does help out people. It shows you what the industry's like and all the other options, and getting great advice from you. Like I've done plus, over 100 episodes, and it's always great to learn something new from different engineers, different types of people, and getting to share that with other engineers too. I think that's awesome. So
it's such a great resource.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for continuing to provide these resources to professionals throughout our world. It's just a great resource, and I encourage everybody to listen and be a good advocate of themselves, and also be an advocate for the profession and the incredible work that we do. It's a lot of responsibility, but the buildings that we create, they have lasting impact.
Yeah, they're worth it. Yeah, thanks so much, Natalie.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We would love to hear your feedback, comments, or questions. To leave them, please visit structuralengineeringchannel.com. There you will find a summary of key points as well as the links to any of the resources or websites mentioned during the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. And until next time, we wish you the best in all your structural engineering endeavors.